My name is Eliza Shepherd, and the first time I understood what it meant to be invisible, I was 8 years old, standing in a living room full of suitcases and silence. My sisters were going to Disneyland. I was going to Aunt Carol's, with a kiss on the forehead and a vague excuse that still echoes in my mind. Before we dive into this story about betrayal, quiet revenge, and unexpected triumph, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to know who else has ever been treated like the afterthought in their own family. The living room smelled like lemon floor polish and popcorn, a combination that still makes my stomach tighten all these years later. My sisters, Isla and Janelle, were jumping up and down beside 2 enormous pink suitcases. Their laughter felt like confetti, sparkling, loud, and not meant for me. Mom was adjusting Isla's glittery headband while Dad wrestled with the zipper of Janelle's suitcase. They barely noticed me standing at the edge of the couch, clutching the straps of my backpack like a lifeline. "Eliza, sweetheart," Mom finally said, not quite looking at me, "you'll be going to Aunt Carol's this weekend. She's excited to have you." There it was, the decision already made. "But I thought we were all going together," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Isla spun around, her eyes gleaming. "We are, you're not. Try not to cry when we post from the castle," Janelle added, tossing her long hair over one shoulder like a shampoo commercial villain. I didn't cry, not then. I blinked hard and looked at my dad, hoping, no, begging for a reason, a different answer, something. He gave a tight smile. "Carol's place will be more your speed. You're our quiet one. This will be good for you." Mom chimed in. "You don't even like rides, baby. You always get dizzy. Carol will enjoy your company, and you two can play chess." I didn't know how to play chess, but I knew how to swallow disappointment like it was cough syrup. Bitter, necessary, and not up for negotiation, I nodded slowly. "Okay." That was all I said. Okay. Inside, though, something cracked. A small fracture, like the beginning of a fault line. I didn't know it yet, but that moment would define the next 2 decades of my life. Not the missed trip. Not the castle. Not the princesses my sisters would giddily pose with while I was tucked away in a quiet home with an older woman who made tea at 4 p.m. sharp. It was the message underneath. You don't matter as much. You are optional. I packed my little suitcase in silence, listening to the sound of my sisters shrieking over matching Mickey ears, while Mom debated which sunscreen was best for Janelle's sensitive cheeks. No one asked what I wanted. No one looked back as I wheeled my bag down the driveway. Even now, I wonder, was it easier for them to believe I was quiet, or did they just never listen closely enough to hear me? I remember the car ride to Aunt Carol's. No music, just the low hum of the highway and the occasional turn signal clicking like a slow metronome. "Sacramento's so loud," Aunt Carol said gently when she opened the front door. "Santa Rosa's quieter. You'll like it here." She didn't mean it cruelly. In fact, her voice was the first kindness I'd heard that day. And yet, I still remember how I nodded, pretending to agree, even though my heart was miles away, strapped into a seat between my sisters, hurtling toward Cinderella's castle. Back then, I didn't know what compound interest was, or why anyone would want stocks instead of souvenirs. But I did know this. One day, they'd remember the girl they left behind. Aunt Carol's house in Santa Rosa was the opposite of Sacramento in every possible way. There were no high-pitched squeals, no glitter trailed across floors, no last-minute tantrums over mismatched socks. Just quiet, soft, humming quiet. Her house smelled like lavender and cedarwood. Every piece of furniture had a story. The clock in the hallway had been her father's. The tea set in the dining room had traveled with her through 3 states and 2 marriages. And the bookshelf, towering and filled to the brim, wasn't just furniture. It was a universe. That first evening, Aunt Carol brought out a chessboard. She placed it between us at the dining table with the kind of reverence usually reserved for fine china. "Do you know how to play?" she asked, pouring me a cup of mint tea in a tiny porcelain cup. I shook my head. She smiled, warm and unhurried. "Perfect, I love a blank slate." There was no edge to her voice, no impatient sigh. No, "this is what's best for you," echoing off the walls. She taught me that the pawn wasn't weak, it was strategic. She explained how the queen held more power than any other piece. How the game wasn't about luck but foresight. about the long view, about playing patiently and smart. We played for hours. I lost every time, and I loved it. In the mornings, she made oatmeal with cinnamon and fresh fruit. During breakfast, we'd read the newspaper together. She'd highlight investment articles with a yellow marker and explain them over toast. "Don't worry if you don't understand it all right now," she'd say. "Just get comfortable hearing the words." The stock market sounded like another planet to me, but Aunt Carol made it feel like a puzzle, like something I might one day be able to solve if I paid close enough attention. At night, she read aloud from books by women who had changed the world quietly. Eleanor Roosevelt, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Ada Lovelace. I had never heard these names before. At school, we learned about Lincoln and Washington. At home, we learned how to match shoes to headbands. But here, a different narrative lived. I'd lie in bed after she tucked me in, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slowly overhead, wondering what it might be like to grow up smart instead of sparkly, to win with ideas instead of volume. On the third night, after another chess loss, less humiliating than the first, Aunt Carol said something I never forgot. "One day, you'll understand compound interest better than any Prince Charming." I laughed, mostly because it felt like a joke, but she wasn't laughing. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand gently. "You don't have to be the loudest," she said. "You just have to learn to see the whole board." It was such a strange thing to say to a kid, but it landed somewhere deep in me. I didn't know what I wanted to be yet, but I knew I didn't want to be overlooked again. Not ever. The days passed quietly, rhythmically, in that tidy house filled with books and routines and cups of tea. My parents called once, just once. They asked if I was behaving, if I was letting Carol rest, and reminded me to thank her properly when I left. I could hear my sisters giggling in the background. They didn't ask to talk to me. I didn't cry, but that call closed something in me. Aunt Carol didn't ask about it. She just handed me a notebook and a pen the next morning and said, "Writers keep records, you'll want this someday." I filled that notebook with questions, drawings of chess boards, and big ideas about companies I didn't understand yet: Nike, Disney, IBM. Carol encouraged every scribble. She never tried to replace my mother. She didn't spoil me or praise me excessively. She just saw me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet one. I was the curious one. And in Aunt Carol's house, that was the best thing to be. When the week was over and my parents came to pick me up, I didn't say much in the car. I just looked out the window, letting the familiar cityscape of Sacramento return like a low-grade headache. "You had fun?" Dad asked. "Yeah. Carol's a bit boring, huh?" Mom added, laughing. I didn't answer. I just clutched the notebook in my lap and stared at the back of her head, wondering how long it would take them to realize that something had changed. They never did. Aunt Carol died on a Tuesday morning. I was 28. The call came while I was on the treadmill watching muted market analysis on the gym TV. I let the phone ring twice before picking up. Her number flashing across the screen didn't alarm me. Carol called me every few months, mostly to discuss books or ask if I'd seen the latest investment quarterly. But it wasn't her voice. It was her lawyer. "Miss Shepherd, I'm afraid I have some difficult news." My legs slowed until the treadmill belt stopped. My throat dried out. They told me she passed peacefully in her sleep. No pain, no prolonged illness, just a quiet ending exactly like her. The funeral was held 4 days later in Santa Rosa in a chapel so modest and orderly it felt like an extension of her living room. I wore navy, not black. She hated black, too performative, she once said. As if grief needs a costume. The casket was closed. Carol hadn't wanted viewing. She once told me, "People remember you better through words than through faces." Her obituary, written by me, ended with the sentence, "She believed quiet girls should build empires." The chapel filled slowly. Mostly older professionals, financial advisors, former clients, women in conservative pantsuits who'd clearly come from respectable offices. There were a few cousins, too, unfamiliar and fidgety. I hadn't seen them in years. I sat in the front row, alone. Not because I didn't have family, but because they weren't there yet. Or maybe they wouldn't come at all. My mother had called that morning, asked what she should wear, then followed it with a breezy, "Anyway, don't expect a big turnout." Carol was a bit eccentric, wasn't she? The service began. I spoke briefly, holding my voice steady as I described Carol's laugh, sharp, unexpected, rare, and her love for mint tea and late-night stock talk. She taught me the difference between being quiet and being ignored, I said, my voice catching slightly. And she never let me forget that I was capable of more than anyone else believed. After the final hymn, the guests filtered out slowly. Some shook my hand, offered soft condolences. Others looked at me with vague curiosity. And then the whispers started. She left everything to Eliza. No way, the house, sure, but the firm. She barely spoke to the rest of us. My cousin Lindsay, a real estate agent with impossibly white teeth, cornered me near the exit. Hey, just wanted to say, congrats, I guess. That's kind of wild, huh? I blinked. Excuse me. Well, I mean you're set now. Carol had money, like serious money. We always thought it would go to like a foundation or something, or maybe to Mom since she's the oldest. I offered her a tight smile. Carol made her wishes clear. Still, kinda cold, don't you think? She muttered. I didn't respond. I just walked out into the cool Santa Rosa air and gripped the folder the lawyer had handed me. Inside were the papers, the deed to the house, Carol's personal will, and the documents that officially transferred ownership of her boutique investment firm, Shepherd and Wells, to me, a woman most of my family thought was still too quiet for business. A girl they'd forgotten on the Disneyland trip, a placeholder in holiday cards, a name at the bottom of family texts, always responding 2 days too late. She left it all to me, the house, the firm, the files with notes scribbled in the margins. Eliza will know what to do with this. Later, when I returned to Sacramento, I told my parents over dinner. Their expressions were unreadable at first, then stunned, then something else, something like irritation. She really left you the business? Mom asked, glancing at Dad. Well, that's generous. That's a lot of pressure, Dad added quickly. Managing people, keeping track of money. Are you sure you're ready for all that? They said it like they were offering concern. But I knew what it was, disbelief. Not in Carol's decision, in mine. I wanted to ask them, when did you decide I wasn't capable? Was it the day I didn't cry over Disneyland? Was it when I chose spreadsheets over sorority parties? But I didn't ask. I just excused myself from the table and went home. Later that night, I walked through Carol's house alone. Every shelf, every corner felt intentional. She'd been preparing for this, preparing me. I sat at her desk, opened her final investment portfolio, and began reading. That night, I didn't cry. I planned. A week later, I stood in the glass-walled boardroom of Shepherd and Wells, the firm Carol had built from nothing more than logic and tenacity. Her name still shimmered in silver above the reception desk. And now, so did mine. The morning sun slanted through the tall windows, hitting the oak table where 6 employees sat, some with arms crossed, others avoiding eye contact altogether. Skepticism hung in the air like dust in light. I straightened the cuffs of my navy blazer, the same one I'd worn to Carol's funeral, and cleared my throat. Good morning, I said, my voice steady despite the butterflies swarming in my gut. My name is Eliza Shepherd. I know most of you knew my aunt. I also know most of you are wondering what comes next. They didn't deny it. I took a breath. What comes next is legacy. A man at the end of the table, Martin, I'd learned, shifted in his seat. No offense, he said, but legacy doesn't guarantee leadership. I nodded, appreciating his honesty. You're right, and I'm not here to prove I'm Carol. I'm here to prove I understood her. That got a few eyes back on me. I set down the printed reports I'd spent the past 72 hours analyzing. Carol believed in potential, quiet, often overlooked, but never accidental. That's why she left this firm not to the biggest bidder, but to someone who saw the long game. I clicked the remote, lighting up the projector screen. I've reviewed our current portfolios. I've identified 3 underperforming assets that have promise, and I'm proposing a slow shift, emphasis on ethical growth sectors with a 12-month margin reset strategy. Silence. Then a slow, skeptical, almost reluctant nod from Linda, the head of client accounts. Martin leaned forward. And if the board disagrees? There is no board, I replied, meeting his gaze. Carol retained full ownership, and now so do I, he blinked. A few smiles flickered. Not warm, not yet, but real. I continued. This week, we'll meet with our top 5 clients, walk them through our refreshed philosophy, and clarify that the firm is not in flux, it's evolving. After the meeting, most of the staff returned to their desks, whispering as they passed. I didn't take it personally. They'd lost their founder. I was a question mark trying to wear her shoes. But by Thursday, something shifted. A junior analyst, Kristen, sent me a note after our check-in. "Your logic's sharp. You don't lead like Carol. You lead like you." That afternoon, we landed a small win. Nothing dramatic, just a smart realignment of a sleepy client portfolio that resulted in a 3% boost and a very surprised thank you email from the client. Kristen printed it out and taped it to the office fridge with a neon sticky note. Wins matter, even the quiet ones. By Friday, someone brought in muffins. It sounds silly, but muffins mean something in an office. They mean people are beginning to relax. I stayed late that night, sitting at Carol's desk with the lights low, reviewing reports and quietly smiling. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was motion, it was momentum, it was mine. The invitation to dinner came as a text, a group one from my mother, Sunday dinner. "Bring wine if you like, everyone's coming." 6 p.m. It was. Vague, like nothing had changed. Like the last 20 years hadn't happened. I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes before replying, sure. I bought expensive wine, 2 bottles, actually, and designer handbags for Isla and Janelle. Not because I thought they'd appreciate them, but because I wanted to walk into that house with 0 question marks. No loopholes. No, she got lucky whispers. If they were going to overlook me, they'd have to do it with Gucci in their laps. When I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, the flood of memories hit harder than expected. The porch still creaked. The yard still needed trimming. Same house, different eyes. Inside, the smell of pot roast and rosemary floated through the air. My mother was in the kitchen, lips pursed, her apron crisp. My sisters were already seated at the dining table, flipping through their phones. I placed the bags at their feet with a smile. "A little something for you both." Janelle looked up, blinked. "Oh," Isla's brows lifted. "You didn't have to bring anything." They opened the bags anyway. Designer leather, sleek branding, tissue paper still fresh. Janelle laughed. "Wait, these are real." "Of course," I said, seating myself. I figured it was time I acted like the successful sibling. Isla gave a half smile. "You rob a bank or something." "No," I replied calmly, unfolding my napkin. "I inherited one." That earned me a pause, not long, but a pause. My mother entered with a tray of green beans, her expression unreadable. "Eliza, sit up straight." "I am sitting," I said, keeping my voice light. Dinner began. The conversation tiptoed around me like I was a guest, not blood. Isla talked about a Pilates instructor she was dating. Janelle mentioned her podcast. It's small, but the potential's huge. No one asked about the firm. No one asked how I was, and I didn't offer. At one point, I complimented the table setting. My mother said, "Yes, well, I thought since everyone was home, we'd make it special." Everyone. I let that hang in the air. Because I wasn't sure I'd ever been included in that everyone. I glanced around the table, the laughter, the wine, the studied nonchalance. And I realized something I hadn't fully admitted until now, even after the firm, even after the inheritance. Even after building something that mattered, they still didn't see me. Because they never had. Because they chose not to. I looked at Isla, laughing at something Janelle had said. At my mother, already clearing a half-full plate I hadn't touched. At the empty space they'd always reserved for themselves. I didn't feel angry, or sad, just done. They could keep their place settings. I had my own table now. Back at the office, the world made sense again. No one here tried to shrink me into silence or mistake grace for weakness. Here I was respected. Not adored, not yet. But respected, and that felt infinitely more valuable. I spent Monday morning in back-to-back calls, finalizing the sale of one of our firm's most dormant legacy assets. A bundle of biotech shares Carol had held quietly for over a decade, bought low, held long, and now ripe for harvest. By Tuesday afternoon, the wire confirmation came in. $5.5 million. Liquid, clean, earned. I stared at the screen for a long moment. The number glowed, too big for disbelief, too real for pride. This wasn't luck. This was legacy. How it was fuel. Should I call in the bank courier? my assistant Marcy asked, poking her head into the office. I shook my head. No, I'll deliver it myself. She blinked. All of it. No, just the seed, I replied, standing to gather my coat. But first, I need to test something. Her brow furrowed. A test, I smiled, locking my drawer with a soft click. A truth test. Down in the parking garage, I slipped into my car and input a familiar address into the GPS. Not my bank. Not a client's office. Sierra Guardian Trust. I hadn't been there in years. Not since Carol set up the original holdings in my name when I was 22. A precaution, she'd called it. Just in case the world turned unpredictable. Trust the ones who understand both money and people, she had said. But always verify. The building rose sleek and arrogant off Mariner Street, marble pillars, gold-tinted glass, a fortress for other people's wealth. I walked in alone. No briefcase. Just a slim envelope and a purse. At the front desk, the clerk smiled. Can I help you? Yes, I'd like to make a small deposit, $100 into a new trust. She blinked, surprised. Cash, yes. She nodded slowly, motioned to a lounge area. Someone will be with you shortly. A moment later, she appeared, Melissa Shepherd, my sister. In a tight navy blazer, her hair pulled into a precise knot. Her smile sharp, eyes even sharper. She hadn't seen me yet. Miss Shepherd, she said, scanning her clipboard. Yes, I said, standing. The smile froze, then reassembled, clumsier, stiffer. Eliza. Melissa. She walked me to her station with the forced charm of someone babysitting a bomb. We sat. Her pen tapped once against the pad. $100 deposit? Yes. She didn't bother hiding her amusement. We don't usually open trusts for such modest amounts. I understand. Melissa leaned back, lips curling. But I suppose we all have to start somewhere, right? The clerk from the front desk chuckled behind her screen. Melissa caught the sound and straightened with smug energy. We don't really cater to people at this level, she added, voice just loud enough for the room to hear. We handle high-value clients. You might want to consider a retail branch instead. I nodded. Calm, easy. That old fault line inside me quiet but intact. Thank you, I said, standing and sliding the envelope toward her. I'll wait while you process it. Melissa raised an eyebrow. You're serious? I just smiled. That was the test. What? I stepped back, voice smooth. Please wait here. And I walked out into the lobby, my heels clicking like punctuation marks on polished marble. A test, Carol had said, not of money, of character. I stood in the marble-floored lobby of Sierra Guardian Trust, the hush of wealth and whispered transactions brushing past me like ghosts in pressed suits. The front desk receptionist barely looked up until the double glass doors swung open. Two men entered, dressed in tailored black suits, moving with the kind of efficiency that made people step out of their way without understanding why. They weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Each carried 3 large duffel bags, one behind the other, 6 in total. They walked directly toward me. Ms. Shepherd, the taller one asked quietly. I nodded once. This is the delivery you requested. I stepped aside and gestured toward the teller window, Melissa's window. The moment her eyes landed on the first bag being unzipped, her body stiffened. The second bag hit the counter with a soft thud, revealing bundles of bills, clean, banded, and stacked with terrifying precision. Silence cracked through the room. A man waiting by the elevators turned, mouth slightly open. A woman in a gray skirt suit stopped mid-sentence on her call. Even the front desk receptionist leaned forward now, eyes wide. Melissa's lips parted, but no sound came out. She glanced behind her, maybe searching for a supervisor or maybe for an escape. I'd like to revise the deposit amount, I said calmly, my voice carrying across the marble like a hymn. Her face lost its color. 5.5 million, I continued. In cash. Excuse me, she croaked. I set my business card on the counter, a new one. White, simple, embossed with silver ink. Eliza Shepherd, managing partner Shepherd, and Wells Capital Melissa stared at it like it was a piece of fiction. A pause, then a tremble. I'll need to. I mean this amount. I'll have to speak to the director, she stammered, already halfway out of her chair. Please do, I replied, not even looking at her now. I'll wait. She moved fast, heels clicking, papers clutched to her chest like armor. Around us, whispers grew bolder. Did you see that? Someone murmured. Is that real money? Who is she? I waited exactly 5 minutes, then 10. Melissa didn't return. The receptionist picked up her phone twice, set it down both times. By the 12th minute, I turned to the security detail. "Please remain with the bags, I won't be long." They nodded. "Understood, ma'am." I walked calmly toward the executive elevators. I knew the way. Carol had once brought me here years ago to meet the then director. "Never be intimidated by a building," she'd said. "It's just walls and names. People are people. Walk like you own the place even before you do." I tapped my phone. Mr. Whitlock answered on the second ring. "Eliza," his voice was warm. "I heard you were in the lobby. Is everything all right?" "I'm afraid not," I said. "I've encountered a situation with one of your client-facing staff." He paused. "Name?" "Melissa Shepherd." A longer pause. "I see," he said carefully. "Come up." Less than 2 minutes later, I was seated in the same wood-paneled office Carol had once taken me to for my first lesson in fiduciary ethics. Mr. Whitlock had aged, his beard now fully white, his eyes a little heavier, but his presence remained precise. "I'm so sorry you experienced this," he said, after I relayed the interaction. "Melissa will be placed on immediate administrative leave while we investigate the incident." I pulled a document from my bag. A formal complaint typed, time-stamped, annotated. He accepted it with a nod. "You came prepared." "I always do," I said. He looked up, searching my face. "You're not like her," he said softly. "You mean Carol?" "Yes, she was surgical. You're strategic." I allowed a small smile. "We played a lot of chess. Did she ever let you win?" "No," he laughed. "Good, then you've earned this moment." I rose. "Please confirm by end of day that the funds have been received and assigned to the new trust under my management. You'll have it in writing. And as for Melissa," I let the sentence hang. His expression was already somber. "It will be handled." As I stepped back into the elevator, alone now, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. Calm, controlled, whole. The quiet girl in the cluttered living room had grown teeth, and no one, not even blood, would ever mistake her silence for weakness again. Dinner at my parents' house was already in full swing when I arrived. The table was set, candles flickering against the glassware, and laughter, familiar and superficial, drifted through the open window as I approached. They hadn't waited for me. Of course they hadn't. I stepped inside without knocking. My mother was in her usual spot at the head of the table, slicing into a roast as if the world depended on it. Dad looked up from his wine, offering a brief, polite nod. Isla and Janelle were mid-story, both talking at once, and Melissa, now temporarily suspended from Sierra Guardian, was sitting rigidly at the far end, her glass untouched. The chatter dulled as I entered. "Eliza," my mother said tightly, "you're late." "No," I replied, walking to my seat. "You just started early." Isla rolled her eyes. "Still dramatic, huh?" I smiled faintly. "No, just punctual in places that matter." Silence settled over the table like a frost. I didn't break it. My father cleared his throat, the universal dad signal for "let's move on." "So," he said, gesturing vaguely with his fork, "we heard there was some sort of scene at Melissa's office." My eyes flicked to Melissa. Her jaw tightened. "Oh, not a scene," I said calmly, unfolding my napkin. "Just a simple deposit, $100 to start, $5.5 million to follow." A fork clattered to a plate. My mother frowned. "What in the world would possess you to bring cash to a trust company?" "That's dangerous. It's intentional," I interrupted. "It was a test when your daughter failed." Melissa's cheeks flared pink. "You ambushed me. I requested a service, you made it personal." "You embarrassed her," my mother snapped. "No," I said evenly, setting down my fork. "Melissa embarrassed herself, I simply exposed it." A beat passed, then two, and then April spoke. April, our youngest sister, the quiet one. The one who usually stayed out of every clash, every power dynamic, every passive-aggressive jab. "I was there," she said suddenly. Everyone turned. "What?" Janelle asked. "I was in the back office when it happened," April continued, voice steady. "I saw the deposit, I heard what Melissa said." Melissa's eyes widened. "April, she humiliated Eliza in front of the staff," April said, louder now. "And it wasn't the first time. She's been making jokes behind her back for years." "Enough," my father said, standing halfway. "No, it's not enough," April shot back, turning toward him. Eliza's the only one who's ever treated me like I mattered, like I wasn't invisible, and we've all pretended for years that how this family treats her is normal. The room went still. I've watched her work, build, carry herself with more integrity than anyone at this table, and I'm done watching in silence. For the first time in my life, April didn't look like the youngest. She looked like a mirror of who I used to be, quiet, watching, dismissed, but no longer. She reached across the table and placed her hand on mine. "You're not alone anymore," she said, and just like that, something shifted. My mother didn't speak. My father sat back down slowly. Janelle glanced away, ashamed. Melissa looked like she wanted to disappear. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply sat in the silence I'd been trained to survive, and for once they had to sit with it too. It had been 3 weeks since the dinner. 3 weeks since April, quiet, observant, underestimated April, shattered the silence that had lived in our family for decades. No one called me after that night. Not to argue, not to apologize, not to clarify what had happened, which had always been their preferred method of softening accountability into something unrecognizable. This time, there were just pauses. Long, heavy pauses in the places where guilt usually came gift-wrapped in fake concern. And honestly, I welcomed it. The quiet meant space. Space meant clarity. Then one rainy Tuesday morning, she showed up, Melissa. I spotted her through the office glass, standing stiffly in the reception area, holding a large envelope in both hands like it was a peace offering or a time bomb. Marcy buzzed me. "She says she's not here for drama." "Let her in," I said. I didn't rise when she entered. She didn't ask me to. Melissa looked smaller than usual, less polished. Her hair wasn't pulled tight, her blazer wasn't a power move, just a woman unsure of her footing. "I wanted to say thank you," she began, standing just inside the door. "For not going public, you could have humiliated me." I closed my laptop slowly. "It wasn't about humiliating you." She nodded. "I know that now." A pause stretched between us. She held out the envelope. "I started reading this after I was put on leave. It's Carol's old beginner finance guide. The one she printed for her clients. You annotated it years ago with your own notes." I took the envelope, thumbed the edge. "She gave me a copy once," Melissa said. "I never opened it, thought I was too smart for it." Another pause. "Turns out I was just too entitled." She swallowed hard. "I was cruel to you, not just at the bank always, because I resented how calm you were, how you didn't need attention to feel important, and I mistook that for weakness." I watched her carefully. No theatrics. Just honesty. "What do you want from me, Melissa?" She hesitated. "Help, a starting point. I want to learn not just about money, but about this. How you carry yourself, how you built what you did." I leaned back in my chair. This was the same sister who had laughed at my quietness, who weaponized condescension and hid it behind pretty smiles. And now she was asking me to be her teacher, not because she deserved it, but because she finally understood the cost of what she'd dismissed. "You're not asking to go backward," I said quietly. "You're asking to start over." Melissa nodded. "I can't promise forgiveness," I added, "but I can offer structure." She didn't flinch. "Structure's more than I've earned." I stood, walked over to the shelf behind me, and pulled out a worn book. Aunt Carol's copy of The Intelligent Investor, its spine soft from years of use. "I was 11 when she handed this to me," I said. "I didn't understand half of it, but I read it anyway, because I wanted to learn the rules before someone tried to use them against me." Melissa took the book carefully, like it might break. "That's your first assignment." She looked up. "There's more." "There will be." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "I'm ready." As she left, I sat back at my desk, exhaling slowly. The ache in my chest wasn't gone, but something else was in its place now. Not hope, not yet, but the faint shape of something worth building. It started with a headline. "Quiet Heiress. Bold Moves. How Eliza Shepard is Reshaping Trust Culture from the Inside Out." The article ran in Bay and Balance, a mid-tier financial magazine known more for soft features than real journalism. Still, it caught fire in my inbox, forwarded by colleagues, flagged by clients, even mentioned in a boardroom in passing. I hadn't intended to become a symbol, but apparently being composed and competent was suddenly headline-worthy. Mr. Whitlock called me the morning it dropped. "You've stirred the hive," he said, half amused. "And some of the bees are impressed." I smiled. "And the others? They're waiting to see if you sting." That afternoon, I received a formal invitation. Sierra Guardian Trust requested my presence for a meeting with their oversight committee. I knew what it meant. They were trying to assess whether I was a threat or a potential partner. I accepted, of course, but I didn't go alone. I asked April to join me. She blinked when I offered. Why me? Because you see what others miss, I said, and because I trust you to speak when it matters most. The meeting took place in a conference room even colder than the lobby where I'd made my deposit. 12 men and women sat around a polished table, their expressions perfectly professional. Mr. Whitlock opened the session. Ms. Shepard has expressed interest in launching a fund through Sierra Guardian, a trust focused on women entering finance. There were nods, measured curiosity. I'd like to propose something more ambitious, I said, standing. A scholarship trust in Aunt Carol's name, not just financial aid, but mentorship, placements, and long-term investment education. A full pipeline. And why us? A silver-haired woman near the end of the table asked. Why Sierra Guardian? I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. Because if the place where my own sister nearly denied me entry can transform into a gatekeeper for underserved brilliance, that's a narrative worth funding. The room fell silent. April stepped forward. She wasn't reading from a script. She didn't need one. I've seen firsthand how women are taught to shrink themselves, she said, voice calm. Eliza didn't just resist that, she rewrote it. And I think it's time we backed women who don't wait to be invited in. By the time we finished, the mood had changed. Not unanimous admiration, but acknowledgement, respect. The kind you don't ask for, the kind you earn. Mr. Whitlock met me outside the room as we left. She's good, he said, nodding at April. She's learning, I replied. Like we all did. He handed me a small envelope. Melissa's review results. I didn't open it, not yet, because I didn't need paperwork to know the real verdict. Melissa had already served her sentence, one written in shame, self-awareness, and the work she was now choosing to do. Whether or not she returned to the trust was secondary. She had finally begun to build something of her own. And so had I. It wasn't supposed to be a confrontation. It was just Sunday dinner, again. My mother had called this time, sounding uncharacteristically neutral. We're all going to be here. I thought it would be nice if you came too. Nice. That word always did too much or too little. Still, I agreed. Out of courtesy, or maybe curiosity, I wanted to see if anything had shifted, or if they were still hoping the last dinner would just wash away. I wore navy again. A soft sweater this time. Comfortable, clear, composed. The table was set like always, roasted chicken, mashed potatoes. Glasses half full of white wine that had never been chilled enough. It could have been any Sunday from the last 20 years, until it wasn't. The tension began before I'd even sat down. Melissa was already there, quiet, sober-eyed, not reaching for the wine. April offered a small smile as I entered. Janelle and Isla were both too busy fiddling with their phones to make eye contact. Sit, my mother said, motioning vaguely toward the open chair. We've already said grace. That was new. Dinner started with small talk, April's internship, a neighbor's renovation, Isla's latest almost brand deal. I said nothing. I chewed slowly. Watched. Measured. Then my father said it. You know, he began, setting his fork down with a clink, this little thing you did with Melissa, it wasn't necessary. I didn't react. He went on, you embarrassed her. Publicly, that's your sister, Eliza. Across from me, Melissa visibly flinched, but didn't speak. My mother chimed in, lips pinched. We don't tear each other down in this family. I laughed, quiet, almost like an echo of a sound I used to make when I was younger, when things were so absurd I didn't know what else to do. You don't tear each other down, I repeated. Eliza, my mother warned. No, I said, voice steady now. You erase, you overlook. You dismiss, you call it peace, but it's just pretty silence. My father sighed. We're trying to have a nice dinner. Nice, I echoed. There's that word again. I set down my fork, met his eyes. You sent me to Aunt Carol's while everyone else went to Disneyland. You let my sisters mock me for years while calling it sibling rivalry. You asked me to be smaller so they could be louder, and now that I'm not, you call it cruelty. The table was frozen. No one chewed. No one sipped. Even the walls seemed to lean in. You don't get to rewrite my tone because you don't like my volume, I continued. Melissa wasn't embarrassed by me. She was exposed by her own behavior. I just stopped letting it be private. My mother opened her mouth, closed it, And then April spoke. She's right. Every head turned. April looked up from her plate, her voice low but unwavering. Eliza's been the backbone of this family for years. You just didn't see it because she never demanded it. But she's the only one who's ever shown up without expecting something back. Janelle blinked. Isla frowned. Melissa finally whispered, "She taught me more in 2 weeks than I learned in 2 years at my job." I looked at her. For the first time, her words didn't feel like performance. They felt like accountability. And then I turned to my parents. "You don't have to agree," I said. "You don't have to apologize, but you will stop calling what you did love. Because love doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient." My mother looked away. My father leaned back, shoulders heavy. There was nothing left to say, so I stood. "I'm going now. I have things to build with people who know how to hold space." April rose too, quietly, without needing permission. And for the first time, I didn't walk out of that house feeling like a guest. I walked out like I owned the life I'd built, and everything it had taught me to leave behind. 2 weeks passed before I saw Melissa again. She came alone this time. No clipboard, no blazer, just jeans, sneakers, and a shy sort of resolve. Marcy caught me before I headed into my office. "Your sister's here," she said gently. "She brought lunch, didn't want to assume, but," I smiled. "It's okay, let her in." Melissa stepped in carrying 2 paper bags from my favorite cafe downtown, the one Carol used to take me to after chess games. She must have remembered, or asked April. Either way, it mattered. "I figured it was my turn," she said, setting the bags down. I motioned to the chair across from mine. She sat. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore, just tentative. She handed me a manila folder after we'd finished eating. "It's everything I've been studying. I made notes, flashcards, even a couple mock portfolios. I know I'm not ready for anything big yet, but I want to do this, for real." I opened the folder, scanning her notes. They weren't perfect, but they were careful. Thoughtful, she'd done the work. "I don't want a shortcut," Melissa added. "I want to earn what I ask for." I closed the folder and looked at her. "Then I'll give you something better than a shortcut." Her eyes widened slightly. "What?" "An internship," she blinked. "You're serious?" "It'll be brutal," I said. "You'll start at the bottom, data entry, research summaries, coffee duty when needed." She smiled. "I deserve that." "No," I corrected softly. "You don't deserve punishment. You deserve the process. That's how we all learn." She exhaled, and I swear her shoulders dropped an inch. "I'm ready." I handed her a badge, not a personalized one yet, just intern temp access. Still, her fingers curled around it like it was gold. Later that week, April knocked on my door with a timid grin. "Got a sec?" She held out a crisp manila envelope. "I want to apply for the scholarship committee, the one for the Carol Shepherd Trust." I raised an eyebrow. "You're applying." "I don't want special treatment," she said. "Just a chance to help choose who we lift next." Something about the way she said "we" warmed my chest. "Interview's next Thursday," I replied, slipping the envelope into my desk. "Don't be late." April laughed. "Wouldn't dream of it, boss." By the end of the month, the 3 of us, me, Melissa, and April, were eating lunch together on the rooftop patio of the firm's new building. Not daily, not always easily, but it was happening. Conversations that used to be landmines were now starting points. Moments of silence were space to think, not accusations waiting to detonate. Janelle even sent flowers one morning. No card, just a small vase of lilies with a note that read, "You're doing something real. I see it." And for the first time in years, I let myself believe she meant it. Carol's presence still lived in the firm. Her name on the walls, her books in the conference room. But the energy had shifted. It wasn't just her legacy anymore. It was ours, built not out of guilt or revenge, but out of choice, out of intention, out of the quiet power of women who finally saw each other clearly. 2 years later, I stood behind a curved glass podium, overlooking a ballroom full of people dressed in black ties and borrowed pride. The Trust Women Gala shimmered beneath golden chandeliers. Spotlights swept the ceiling, refracting off champagne flutes and sequined gowns. The air was thick with donation cards and curated applause. But I wasn't nervous. I wasn't hiding. This time they invited me. And this time I didn't need anyone's permission to take the stage. I wore navy again. I always did when it mattered. Carol's brooch, a silver rook, was pinned near my collarbone, my quiet talisman. "My name is Eliza Shepherd," I began, my voice firm but warm. I'm the managing partner of Shepherd and Wells Capital and the founder of the Carol Shepherd Trust. But more importantly, tonight I'm speaking as someone who wasn't supposed to be here. The ballroom quieted. I grew up invisible in a loud family. I was the one sent away, the one overlooked, the one who smiled through being second or third. I was told I was too quiet for Disneyland. And yet, here I am designing castles of a different kind. A soft ripple of laughter moved through the audience, tentative, then real. Carol taught me something that no one else did. That silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. That being underestimated is often the greatest advantage a woman can have if she knows how to hold her ground. Behind me, a projection screen lit up, a montage of scholarship recipients. Young women in classrooms, boardrooms, and stockrooms. Some wore hijabs, some wore high heels. All wore the rook pin. A rook can only move straight, I said, pointing gently to the image. But its strength lies in its simplicity. It clears the path. It protects the queen. It stays until the end. In the front row, I saw them. April, now director of strategic partnerships, reviewing notes even as I spoke. Melissa beside her, recently promoted to financial operations associate. Her blazer was softer now, her gaze steadier. And next to them, my mother. In a navy dress I hadn't seen since Carol's memorial. Her eyes glistened, but for once she didn't look away. Maybe she was finally seeing me. Or maybe, just maybe, she was seeing herself in me and realizing I hadn't become a stranger. I'd simply become everything she never dared to be. My aunt believed that financial literacy is generational armor, I continued. She left me a firm, yes, but more than that, she left me a blueprint. A reminder that wealth isn't just about money. It's about knowing what you're worth before anyone else can discount it. I glanced down at my speech, but I didn't need it. Because this wasn't a performance, this was a homecoming. When you fund one woman, I said slowly, you don't just change her life. You rewrite the narrative for her daughters, her clients, her team, her legacy. The applause started before I finished. It wasn't polite. It was thunderous. And this time I stood in it, not surprised, not shrinking, but solid, like the rook I wore. After the gala, as the room shifted into mingling and mingling shifted into memory, a girl approached me. Barely 19, sharp eyes, shaking hands. I'm one of the new recipients, she said, barely above a whisper. I thought maybe I didn't belong. I placed my hands on her shoulders and looked her in the eye. That's exactly how you'll know you're in the right room. Belonging isn't given, it's claimed. She nodded, blinking fast. I handed her a rook pin. You don't have to roar to be powerful, I said. You just have to be undeniable. That night, I rode home in the back of a town car, passing the lit skyline. April sent me a text from the after-party. You built something real, and now we're all building it with you. And for the first time in my life, I allowed the tears to come, not from grief, not from anger, but from the deep, bone-level knowing that I hadn't just survived them. I had outgrown them. I hadn't found a seat at the table. I'd built the table, and the chairs, and the foundation beneath it, so that no girl like me ever had to wonder if she belonged again.